to Changing the Sales Game on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman, and you know that my guests and I are always excited that you join us every week. So here's the deal. As you listen to the show, changing your sales game, changing your career, changing whatever it is in business that you're dealing with, my guests and I know that that could sometimes be a challenge. So in the show notes, I have a free gift for you. It's my communication style assessment. You get 2 reports. First report will spotlight just your natural kind of communication superpowers. Really, it's going to identify how your message lands when you communicate, kind of naturally for you. Flip side, your lowest score is usually a blind spot that we're unaware of. So in the report that you'll get a secondary report, which will shine a light on that blind spot. Usually it's with the people who communicate 180 degrees different than you. How's your message landing there? That's kind of an important piece of information to have to be able to navigate just with a little bit more ease and grace. So again, that information and that link is in my show notes. Now, to set the stage for my guests and my conversation today, I chose a quote by the wonderful Nelson Mandela, and he says, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you fail." I just really love this quote because if we didn't continue to rise after we fail or fall down, we wouldn't have innovation, we wouldn't have growth, we wouldn't have new opportunities. And at the end of this, maybe we won't have the life that we desire and truly deserve. So most people think it's only about having the ability to achieve X, Y, or Z. And the reality is resilience and the choice to keep getting up, moving forward. It could be really, really powerful, especially for our world, right, which is sales, business, and growth. So today I'm thrilled to have an inspiring entrepreneur and sales maven. His name is Akeem Shannon. And he's with us today. And Akeem is hailing from St. Louis, although he's in Kentucky. We'll talk about that in a minute. And Akeem is a creative mind behind Flipstik, a gravity-defying phone accessory that not only earned him a spot on Shark Tank, but also caught the attention of the legendary Snoop Dogg, one of my favorites. Akeem's journey is a fascinating tale of resilience, innovation, and navigating the dynamic world of sales. Let's delve into the unique experience and insights of my very, very good friend, Akeem. So Akeem, thanks for being on and for sharing your brilliance with us.
Thanks. Well, I don't know about brilliance, Connie, but I will share what I know. How about that?
That's the deal. So really quick, Akeem, you're usually from St. Louis, but you had the opportunity to be down in Kentucky for the Derby and you get to see some
Yeah.
fam, which is always awesome, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was so crazy. I was doing a speaking engagement in Indianapolis, and the coordinators and the event planners that were doing the event were like, "Hey, you want to come down to Derby? We got VIP tickets." And so we it's just been great. So in all the years I've come to Kentucky, never been to the Derby, so this was a first for me.
That's awesome. And now you get to spend the weekend with the family. So see, at
In the week
life
with the fam.
synchronicities, right? It's life synchronicities. Yep.
Yes, yes.
You've earned that, my friend. You've earned it. All right. So, my first question for you: what inspired you to persevere after I know you experienced some academic setbacks? You lost a scholarship during your studies at Howard University, right? How did you
Mhm.
start to learn how to inspire yourself for that perseverance?
Yeah. It was tough. I went to school for chemical engineering. I shouldn't have been there because I didn't like chemistry, but they said I was going to make a lot of money doing it. So I was like, okay, yeah, let's do chemical engineering. And I lose this scholarship and I have to come home. And I got to say, like, I was so ashamed. Like, I was the only child. I just felt like I had let down my parents, my family, myself. I didn't want any of my friends to know. I was just really just engulfed with with depression and anxiety and this fear that I would be this deadbeat. And so I made myself a promise. And I said, look, if I can't have a college degree, at least by the time my friends are graduating college, I can at least be making as much as the average college graduate. And since I always like to talk, and I was always that kid who, sold the most candy bars at the school fundraiser, the most calendars, whatever it may be. I decided, hey, maybe I can get into sales. And since I was also a big techie, I said, hey, what if I could get into cell phone sales? And that's how I decided to start working in a retail cell phone shop. And, in the beginning, I still didn't feel good about myself, but no one knew it was a secret. It was just me and my parents were the only ones that knew that I had suffered this huge failure. But over the course of about 3 years, starting at just $10 an hour, I was able to not only save up $100,000 from sales, but I was able to improve my sales skills. I became the number one sales rep at not just that company, but a second Fortune 500 company. And I remember I was originally at Sprint and then at Verizon. And I remember Verizon had this big sales contest called Verizon, excuse me, at Verizon called Verizon Rockstar. And it was going to be this contest where you literally had to, it was a pitch competition where you would pitch Verizon's family of services on a stage to judges, and whoever was the best in the entire company won all these prizes and stuff. And I ended up winning this entire competition down in Miami, Florida at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And for the first time since I had failed, I realized like, oh wow, just because I had failed, it didn't make me a failure because I didn't give up. And that was literally the only difference. And so once I was able to recover from that really, really huge failure in my life, it changed my whole mindset because it showed me that, hey, you can recover from anything.
Yeah.
And look at where I'm at now. It never would have even happened if it hadn't have been for that initial failure. And so that entire 3, 4 year process really helped me as I moved into entrepreneurship and later on in my career. Whenever I face obstacles, I would always look back and say, wait a minute, I was able to overcome that obstacle and it felt like it was over. And so, this doesn't seem like it'll be as hard.
Isn't it interesting that life is a teacher, whether we want it,
Ooh,
right? Whether we want
yes,
it to be
it
or
is.
not. And here you had this, and I give your parents a lot of credit too, because you're our kids, right? And we only want the
Yeah.
best for you. And I know your mom and dad probably knew, like,
Woo!
dude, this
They
isn't
were
the end of the world,
furious.
right?
But they were pissed, but they were
They,
because the thing that they told me is when I went up to school, I lost a scholarship. Then I go back up to school. I don't tell them I fake my grades. And they were like, why didn't you just tell us? If you had told us, maybe we could have helped you. Maybe we
yes,
could have made a phone call. We could have done so many things and you didn't even ask for help.
yeah.
And so I was so afraid that they would just be angry and disappointed and ashamed. Well, really, they were like, you should have just asked. You should have come to us. And so it also definitely, I would say in the long run, ended up strengthening our relationship too.
Family's family, right? And the other thing too that I've learned, in my 4 decades in sales is you can't do it alone. You always need people. So your parents were
Always.
right. That would have been that first lesson, right, as a kid in college. I can't do it alone. Let me ask for help. Let me get a lifeline. Not to say you still wouldn't have ended up here, not to say that nothing really would have changed. You might just not have gone into that deep depression, but for the help
Bingo.
of mom and dad. But here's the thing: did you need to go through that to be where you are now?
Mm,
We'll never know,
mm,
right? We'll never know. But you see how
mm.
the life synchronicities and the things that are thrown in our path, in your case, that perceived, and I'm doing perceived with air quotes for those listening on Apple or Spotify, perceive failures, because you're anything but a failure. You're a dynamic, wonderful young man, and that's an amazing place to be, right? I have
Yeah,
another question. So, with all of that, was there a pivotal moment or for you a realization that drove you to go from that? Because you were success in this corporate, you saved a
very
hundred
successful.
grand, which is awesome. What made you step from this successful sales career into that entrepreneurial vision with your invention, which is the Flipstik?
Yeah. So I ended up leaving Verizon. They had sold off our division to someone else. And I was going to start a company, but I was honestly terrified at the time.
Hmm.
And so I ended up getting an offer to work at Square, the fintech company that makes Cash App. And so I'm working there, and it's a tech company, amazing benefits, all I could ask for. I was the only person there without a college degree. And, it was a great company to work for. And I remember I closed this big deal. It was going to represent $12 million in credit card processing a year for Square. And I made like $2,000 or $3,000 off of that deal. And it didn't sit right with me. And I realized, and it was fair, that's what I signed up for. But it was like, man, I don't like being on the side of the equation where I put in the work, I acquire the customer, and I don't have the long-term benefits for it. I want this
Yeah.
to be different. And in a lot of in Square it was different, but in a lot of those industries, you get lifetime residuals when you bring in clients. And this was not the type of business model that they had. And so even though it was a great job, I realized like at that point, I wasn't fulfilled just by doing sales there anymore. I wasn't fulfilled by closing and being the best or anything like that. And it really had just become about money for me. And I knew that it was time for me to take a different path because
Yeah.
I wasn't happy anymore. And when you talk about Connie, that going through that in college and really feeling those emotions, when those things start to creep back up, right? That anxiety, depression, you're not fulfilled. It's a key indicator that lets you know that something's wrong. And that happened to me a couple of times over my sales career. And I'm honestly incredibly grateful because just like my parents, I had incredible bosses. At every job I ever had incredible bosses that were just so in tuned with their employees and their sales team to know, like, hey, something's off, especially with me. They knew, like, hey, something's off. And to rewind just a little bit, I'll tell you, I had a boss at Verizon. I was this Verizon rock star, right? Everyone's coming and filming. I'm meeting all the executives, and my sales start to tank. And what he didn't know at the time is I had been going under a massive anxiety attack. Hadn't been sleeping. Like I was really stressed out. And he came to me, and instead of saying, Akeem, why are your numbers not there? You're not hitting your marks. He said, Akeem, you need to go get some therapy. He's like, because I just had to go through therapy.
Wow.
And I'm seeing you and I know you and you're not here. And it was such a powerful thing for me because I never thought, I'd always been able to compartmentalize. And I think when we think about sales, we just think, hey, we can leave it at home, leave it at the door, come in and hit the ground running. And it's not true. It's
Mm-hmm.
like because when you have to come in with your tank full in order to be able to spend it, especially when you're trying to win friends and influence people. And
Absolutely.
and it was once he showed me that and I was able to get better. And then when I didn't feel good again, I decided it wasn't right for me. It changed the whole way I thought about sales because I realized that my sales performance was directly tied to how I felt. When I felt good, it was so easy, and the customers can sense that on the other side. You know how it is when you're not hitting your numbers, you're behind, you start feeling desperate, and customers can sense that desperateness, and they're like, I don't think I want to buy from this person.
Yeah.
But when you're easy and calm and relaxed, they're like, man, I really like this person. I think I want to do business with them.
Yeah.
And so, when I didn't feel that anymore, I knew it was time for me to leave. And my boss gave me a book called The Alchemist. An
Oh,
incredible, you
my,
you know, you
my
know.
favorite book of all time. Continue.
So he gives me this book, The Alchemist. Now, Connie, I would have known it was everyone's favorite book had I opened the book and read it, but I didn't read the book when he gives it to me. Okay. I'm like, Tom doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not reading this book. And he gave it to me because he's like, Keem, I know you got money saved up. But I don't want you going out and traveling across South Asia or something for the next 10 years. Like you need to go out and do something. You got something inside of you. You need to go out and do it. And so I wasn't listening to him. But this book starts chasing me down. I start hearing about it on TV. It's on the back on the best New York Times bestseller list. I start to hear my mom sends me a video of an interview of Oprah and Pharrell. And she's like, Pharrell, tell us you've won so many Grammys and you worked with so many incredible artists. What's just one book you'd recommend for people? And of course, it's The Alchemist. I still don't read the book. And then eventually I'm moving to this new apartment and I got stuff everywhere. And my boss would give me this beautiful copy of The Alchemist. It was hardback with illustrations and a sleeve, really nice. And in this chaos of moving to a new apartment, I see a book on my kitchen counter. But it's not the book that my boss had gotten me, but it was a copy of The Alchemist. It was an old, tattered, paperback, discount store bin book of The Alchemist. And it freaked me out because I was like, have I always owned this book? Where did this book come from? And I didn't put it on this table. Did the person who used to live here leave this book? Like, where did this book come from? And so I sat down and read it cover to cover. And as you know, Connie, it's about this boy who goes on a journey to find his treasure. And he has these dreams. And he gets stuck along the way. And sometimes he's moving fast, and sometimes he's moving slow, and sometimes he's stalled, but he still marches forth toward these dreams. And it opened my mind up to realizing that, hey, the opportunity for me is out there. It's waiting. But the only thing that's stopping me is I don't see the opportunity right in front of me. And that's even though that book is not about sales, it's not about entrepreneurship, it really is. Because when you're in the right mindset, you see opportunity everywhere and you can zero in on it. And having that mindset is what led to me getting a late night phone call from my uncle, who's an engineer at NASA, who was telling me about this reusable gecko-based adhesive and how he was going to use it on a project. And normally it would have went in one ear and out the other, but now my mindset was like, no, my treasure is out there. Opportunity is waiting for me. I just have to be vigilant of the signs, or as the book calls them, omens. And I couldn't let this concept go. And so I create this product, Flipstik, a little device that lets you stick your phone in any flat surface using this NASA-based adhesive. And we were off to the races. And it was just one of those things where my entire journey in sales, I never knew exactly what I was doing, why sometimes things work, why they didn't work. But through this entire journey, right, like that story, I would use that story again and again, whether it was, in a mall when we had our mall kiosk and we were selling them person to person, when I did a Kickstarter campaign we initially launched, when I tried to get on Shark Tank, when I was getting investors, I started to realize that once I started telling these stories of finding opportunity, people started to listen. And it didn't matter if it was the story of my founding, why I got started, the story of our mission, what it was we were doing, or in the future, the story of our customers and the opportunity they found by using our product. But it opened people up. Whereas before people are very closed. Oh, he's trying to sell me something. I don't want to talk to him. Well, now it was like, well, tell me this story. It sounds interesting. And it really just changed the way it allowed us to grow our business beyond anything I ever could imagine, when I first started. And it's been one heck of a ride.
And it's interesting. Just there was a couple of things I have to unpack there. So The Alchemist, truly probably one of my top 5 favorite books ever. It's such a
Yeah.
simple fable, and yet it's life-changing in the concept within. And when you really stop and pause and understand the concept, like you said, opportunities are everywhere. We walk through life with blinders on. The other thing you said, which is dangerous, right? Because then life
Yep.
is missing us. The
You're
other thing
missing it.
with our hustle culture right now, it's like you got to work
Mm,
hard, nose to the grindstone.
mm,
Yes, I believe in hard work, but here's the problem. When I was your age, in my 20s and 30s, nose to the grindstone, work hard. My dad was an immigrant from Italy, and so it was nose to the grindstone. You have to work hard to be able to survive.
mm,
Think about that statement, right? And so
mm,
I was always looking down, working, that I never saw the opportunities that were right in front of me. And
mm,
it's funny, like you, I was successful in sales, and I think we have a similarity with this, Akeem. I was easygoing, I was friendly, I was raised well, so I was honest in how I approached people. It was never about the money; it was truly about serving. Right? That's just how I was raised.
mm,
So
mm.
I think that came through, and I was in the financial service industry. Right? That's still
Right.
where I kind of play. My clients are all in the financial service industry, but anyway, but I started to see success even as a young person in such a technical industry, because I think it was authentic and real, and I knew how to share stories, etc. I didn't know what I was doing until, and this is interesting, and I think you've had a little bit of this reflection as well. When I started, I had 2 babies at home, and in banking, it was merger mania. And I said, I'm done with this. I need to have control. I have babies at home. My time isn't mine. My money's not mine. I have to figure out a better way. And I started my own business. And here's the funny, it's when I was 39. I sat down and I thought, why was I successful in sales? And I started to analyze it like a system, almost like a
Mm,
science. And I realized
mm,
I had a 7-step process. And I thought, oh, I could rinse and repeat this. I could perfect it now, create curriculum and stories to support it, to teach others, because this is easy, man. Once you understood it, It
Once you
became really
understand.
easy. And that's what it sounds like happened to you. Like you were like, wait a minute, I think there's something here. How can I explore and dig in? You have to pause. And just like the fable, he stalled and he paused and he
Yeah.
reflected and then he moved forward. We
Mhm.
forget to do that because it's nose to the grindstone, go forward.
And we've taught the culture has taught us that with the hustle thing, it's like if you're not always grind, 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 there's something wrong with you. And I felt that way for a long time where it's like, man, so I'm lazy. What's wrong with me? And when you get that mindset, you can't get any momentum going. And what I found was that only a couple sales really matter. And when you search and you find those ones that are really, really important, it just starts opening up opportunities because they lead to 10, 20, 30 more sales. And that is what I think that we miss when we do, like you said, when we have our nose to the grindstone, we're just pushing forward. We don't see the big opportunity because sometimes it's not it's rarely the obvious opportunity that exists. And just to give you a quick example,
Yeah.
I try to get on Shark Tank, right? And I tell the story how we got started, what the product is, all this kind of stuff. Get from 40,000 people, pass all those guys down to the final 250, and then I get cut from the show. They're like, Akeem, sorry, you're not gonna make it. We only can film 120. You're getting cut, and we're sorry. And I was devastated, Connie, because I put all my eggs in one basket. I had created this mall kiosk business. We were selling in person to person. We had made about 30 grand in 2 months at a single mall kiosk. And I thought like we have a business here. There's real opportunity. But when I went to go pitch it to Shark Tank, it couldn't get to the final round. So I said, okay, if I can't get those celebrity investors, I'll go find another. And so I start thinking, I start going to events. And when I tell you, Connie, I was going all over the country. I went from the Super Bowl in Atlanta to the BET Awards in LA to back to Atlanta again. Like I was bouncing all over the country, seeing these opportunities. They would just start to slowly connect with each other. Like, oh, well, maybe I'll go here. Maybe I'll go here. And eventually I find out about this big conference called the Revolt Summit. It was a music and comedy summit, but they were going to have a pitch competition for businesses. Let's say I'm gonna go, I'm gonna pitch my business, and this billionaire rap celebrity is like the one hosting this event. I'm like, I'm gonna get them to invest in my business. It's gonna work. And so uh, I find out right before I'm supposed to leave, the pitch competition's close. So I'm not gonna be able to pitch Flipstik. And so I
Oh,
say, look, I already got these tickets. I know I've seen the omens, I've seen the signs. I know I'm supposed to be at this event. Well, it turns out there was a rap competition and that they were going to give away a music deal. So I said, look, I took music appreciation in high school. I am going to write a rap and I will rap the pitch for my business. And that's how I will get them to invest. So with this crazy sales plan, I go. I wrap the pitch for my business. I get to the top five. I'm gonna be able to get on stage in front of this billionaire rapper, DJ Khaled, all of these celebrities. And right before the final competition, they tell me, Akeem, we're gonna have to disqualify you because you're not a real rapper. You don't want a record deal. You're looking for an investment. And I was like, those are the same things. What's the difference between a record deal and an investment? And they're
oh,
like, nope, nope, we can't have you on the stage. And here I was sitting here. I was at a comedy show. There's a comedy show right before this final competition. And I'm not laughing because I feel like my life's a joke. Here I followed this book, The Alchemist. I've been flying all across the country trying to make this dream happen. And it's just gotten snatched away from me. It felt so unfair. But I'll tell you, Connie, my mindset was one, it was ironclad. And we all know in sales, like a no is just one step closer to a yes. And I was like, I can't accept this no. Like I refuse to accept it. And throughout that entire process, there was just so many no's, so many hurdles, but I just knew it was meant for me. So right at the comedy show, as I'm sulking, I decide to stand up and I hold my products in the air. And the comedian looks at me and he's like, bro, what are you doing? You're interrupting my show. He's like, what are you trying to sell me? And I go in full pitch mode. I'm like, this is called the Flipstik. It lets you stick your phone in any surface. You can make TikTok videos with. You can do this. And he starts cracking jokes about all the inappropriate places he wants to stick the Flipstik. Record stuff in the bedroom, and the crowd is laughing and having a great time. The whole show gets derailed, and eventually this comedian lets me on the stage, lets me perform my rap. The whole audience is eating it up. And the same person that disqualified me invites me backstage, introduces me to all of the executives at the company. The sponsor was AT&T, introduces me from them. Eventually, they fly me out to LA. They introduced me, they buy a ton of my product, customize it with their logo, branding. In LA, I end up meeting Snoop Dogg, as you mentioned earlier. Snoop Dogg ends up loving the product. And all of this craziness is happening. And eventually, they're like, they call up one of the judges who was in the pitch competition that I never pitched for. Turns out he's a casting director for Shark Tank. And they're like, you got to have this kid on Shark Tank. He was at this event and he starts rapping during the comedy show. And then we had him at this event. And then Snoop Dogg saw the product and then Snoop Dogg loved it. And he was doing this. And I get a phone call and they're like, hey, we've been hearing about you. And we want you to come audition for Shark Tank.
You ended
And
where you started.
is that not exactly what happened in The Alchemist, Connie?
Holy,
And
did you
I
go on
was
the, did
like,
you ultimately, wait, Akeem, did you go on the Shark Tank?
we go on the show, we get a deal. It lands us in Target, Best Buy, AT&T, T-Mobile, QVC. We even got into the Smithsonian Museum. I mean, a crazy, crazy journey. And as in the moment, it felt so hard and so unfair and so difficult, right? One of the longest sales cycles you can imagine. This was a year and a half in order to get right back where I started onto the show. But the journey that I took to close that sale is that story is the story I told to get on the Shark Tank, which is why when your audience goes and looks it up, they're gonna see me rapping on Shark Tank. That's why I'm rapping on Shark Tank. That's a little behind the scenes nugget for you. That's why we got into retail stores like Target. I told them that story. Who can resist a story like that? I told it to our investors, raised over $1.5 million from investors, and it was because of telling this incredible story. It's how I recruited um, my first three senior employees, senior officer level employees within my company. I was able to show people like there's something bigger here. And it's exciting and it's fun, and you should be a part of it and help me continue this journey. And it was huge. And it was the most powerful story we had until we started to unlock our customers' stories. And I think that one of the most underutilized tools in sales today is people don't tell their stories. They don't tell the stories of why they're doing what they're doing,
Yeah.
why it matters, how they got there, and they don't tell the stories of their customers. And
Yeah.
I found that it disarmed people far more than any set of features and benefits that I could tell them about Flipstik. Like they could tell them to the moon comes home, but it was telling the stories behind everything, telling the stories of our customers and how they were using it. That ultimately is what sold everyone.
And you know what's so funny? Isn't that an easy thing to do if you're
Mm,
authentic and passionate, which clearly you are? Like you knew, wait, this is good stuff here. This is really number one. It was a good product, right? That is extremely
yes.
usable and useful with everybody, selfies and taking trips, and you want the background behind you and all of these things, and how cumbersome it is with the cell phone to take those pictures. So you knew in your heart, like, I'm on to something. This is good stuff. You knew the quality was good. And then disarming people. And it's so funny how you're describing that, because people don't buy the product. They do ultimately, but they buy you. They buy the
Yep.
story. They buy and here's the other thing that, based on your description, you made the product bigger than you, that whole story and journey. It's a life, it's a success of life that we all, I
Mm,
don't care what job you're in, right? Your
yeah.
story is inspiring to live your greatest life, to be open to, even when tragedy, I'm going to use the word tragedy, but even when those missteps and those
Yeah.
your word
Oh, it feels
failure
like tragedy, especially when you're in it.
like, right, like you were sulking in the comedy show and you're like, screw this, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna start playing with my flipstick, and the comedian's like, dude, what are you and now all of a sudden you create engagement. It's all about building relationships. That's why your name got back to Shark Tank, why you kind of went to
Hmm.
the head of the class, if you will. It's all about the relationships. It's personal. Yes, if people people say no to us, you're right. You're more close to a yes. It's going to come. What my product or service wasn't the right fit. But at the end of the day, people do business with people, and people they know, like, and
Bingo.
trust. And that's what you've created. And additionally, people are buying and they're like, you got to hear this story. This is the coolest story ever. So now they're sharing your story, getting people to buy in, and the hype. And you can't make this stuff up, because you're living your life. And let me rephrase that. You're living your best life. And if you weren't, you would still be at one of the companies, right? Probably still doing very well, paying bills, buying a house, whatever the next steps in your personal journey are, right? Amassing wealth. You would have been doing fine. It wasn't enough. We don't listen to our inner soul, Akeem, enough. And, and the other thing I wanted to say, that we're out of time. This is such a great story. But when you were saying that Oprah was talking to
Pharrell
about his music or whatever, and then The Alchemist came up. So she is very, I don't know if you know this, but many years ago in her life, she had a lot of tragedy, right? And then to rise up to where she became, that she's infamous, right? I mean, she's Oprah. Everybody wants to be Oprah. But she said, you have little nudges in life where it's like, hey, wake up. Did you see this? Hey, little whispers. And she says, I didn't listen to those whispers. So God came with a 2x4, hit me upside my head and said, this is where you need to. And that's it. That's exactly.
That's what happened to me.
It happened. You listen to the whisper. Well, maybe the 2x4 was the school piece. Maybe.
No, I had to get hit upside the head, Connie. It kept happening. And it was so funny you say that, because even when I started Flipstik, like, I remember I wanted to find a big influencer, and I had nothing, right? We didn't even have a product. We had nothing. And I wanted to find a big influencer to support us, and they were quoting me these crazy prices. And I kept hearing, when you talk about those whispers, I kept hearing about Huntsville. So my uncle, who helped me come up with the idea for it, he is from Huntsville. Then my mom was like, "Hey, Akeem, do you want to go down for Easter? I'm going to Huntsville for Easter." I was like, "No, I'm busy. I'm working on this new project." Then my assistant at the time, his grandmother was from Huntsville. She was going to come into town and help us make this video for Kickstarter. Kept hearing about it, was in one ear out the other. And so then finally, this big influencer who I really wanted, and they had sent me a quote for $70,000 to do a video. I look at their email, and it says this email was open in Huntsville. And I email them back, and all I say is, I'm coming to Huntsville for Easter. Had no intentions to go. I was like, I'm too busy. Coming to Huntsville for Easter. Would love to meet. Not only did they meet me, because no one goes to Huntsville. Okay. Not only did they meet me, they did the video for free. It got like 3 million views. And it was like, God was just like, are you not listening to what I'm saying? You already read The Alchemist. How many times do I have to give you the hint? So this is where I want you to go. And it's just one of those things where, when you do listen to the whispers, or sometimes to the screams, which will eventually come if you don't listen, man, it removes the hustle, because now you see the unique opportunity and you can pull the thread out. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah. And this is a problem, I think, with sales in general. It's where, you made $1 million sales. Why wasn't it 2 million? We pull the rug out. It wasn't enough. Make more calls. We go into the weeds instead of saying, whoa, pause, breathe. What can we do differently or better in our outreach, right? So that we can pull the thread, like you said. We lose the forest from the trees in sales, because we're only as good as our numbers. And that's dangerous, because the behaviors drive the numbers. And what you're describing is you had to keep pivoting and reinventing yourself, and not even just reinventing, leveling yourself up based on these opportunities. But if you're just on the grind worrying about numbers, and like you said, I was in the slump. And here's the other thing too, that your boss that saw you and knew that you were in a slump and said, here's a book and go through therapy. I hope you're still friends with that person, because
Yes.
That's a great mentor to have, because you don't always see that. A lot of bosses are like, you didn't make your numbers, 30 days, you're out, right? It's this churn and burn in sales. So I think I really hope that just hearing your story, you're delightful, you're funny. The story is hysterical and real and cool, right? That cool factor, which I love. It's bigger than you. That whole story is bigger than you, the individual, because you needed people, right? It takes a village to create. You are wise enough to hear the whisper, hear the 2x4, whatever it was for you. But just such a pleasure, my friend, talking to you. And we're out of time, but I do want to share. So everybody listen, if you've been inspired, which if you're not, I don't know, you have a pulse over there. But if you are inspired, please reach out to Akeem if you have any questions for him specifically. It's Akeem at akeemshannon.com. I will put that in the show notes. Website, akeemshannon.com, again, in the websites. And we're going to text mentor too. And I'm going to put that phone number in the show notes. What do they get with the one-on-one mentorship with you? What can they expect if they choose to do?
So absolutely. So I have a totally free 15-minute, and usually it goes a little longer, mentorship. I'm a huge believer in mentors. I've had incredible mentors, as you mentioned, including bosses. And
Yeah.
so what we'll do is we'll sit down, we'll talk about where you are in your journey, what your goals are, what you're trying to do next. I was able to build a business into one of Inc. magazine's top 50 fastest growing consumer product brands. And I didn't know anything, guys, nothing at all. And so I just had to pick it up along the way, from learning how to do patents to sales to international distribution to manufacturing, all of it. And so I love being able to just share with people and see where they are in their journey, and really encourage you to keep going, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And if you're in sales and you're feeling like, man, I'm stuck. If you make sure you take Connie's assessment, though, because that communication is key. I can't teach that. I don't know. It comes to me. But if you need that communication style, see Connie. But if you want to know like how you can really use the stories, particularly stories of customers, and how you can translate those into amazing set pieces that will draw in, future potential customers, be happy to discuss that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I taught a class. I teach every week, right? My corporate clients. And so I did a class, and at the end of it was our last session together. And, I cry and I play the, graduation music. I'm a dork. But I said to all of them, I make them go around. What is the one thing you learn? One thing, because you can't implement 20 things at once. We usually backslide, right? And that's where frustration comes in. So I ask them one thing that you will commit to doing for at least 30 to 45 days to create this new habit. That's where momentum is built, right? And then we're eager to do more because we see results. And then the other thing I always ask Akeem is, what could I have done better for you? Because I want to continue to grow my skills and remain relevant. And it's so funny. We go around, and you know what they always say, and it touches me because it matters to me. But they say, not only are you engaging and the curriculum is real, right? I learned from it, but your stories, I don't remember necessarily the content, but I do now, because you share a story of what a client went through, or what one of your students went through with a client, and how that client appreciated that, or a story that I went through and how I overcame whatever the challenge was and how I learned from that. And you start sharing things that are just personal and sincere and authentic and vulnerable. They resonate with that. So stories are where it's at. Unfortunately, people get lost in their stories, Akeem, and then you lose the sales.
And they start.
Yeah, you gotta find that, get locked and loaded and make it applicable. But you also have to play with the stories, because people understand stories. The caveman days, they drew pictures and they told stories to
Oral
their kids.
tradition.
All through
It's
tradition.
innate to our nature.
That's exactly right. Can I tell you, I love you. You're amazing. I wish
Well,
you
thank
so
you,
much
Connie.
more success, kiddo. I hope this is the beginning, and that you don't get stuck like the alchemist. But again, if you could end up like double in your game and end up where you are now, but double, hey, let's game, right? We'll sign us up for that.
That'll work. I'll take that.
You're too cute.
Awesome.
Thank you
Well, Connie,
again.
this was really amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Beckett.
And I'm sure we will talk again soon.
I'm sure. Now, don't go though. I'm going to do my close, and then I do want to say a pleasant goodbye, because I want you to have your weekend with your fam. I think that's important time, because we do work so hard, and family time is so, so important. So thank you again, Akeem, and thank you for sharing your story and for the humor, right? Because I think we learn through humor too. So thank you for bringing just a delightful personality to the table. So appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together, no matter where you are, on changing your sales game and whatever that means to you. My guests and I have those stories and experiences and love sharing. And hopefully you heard. Here's the thing. Reach out to Akeem, go to the website, do the one-on-one mentorship. That's your call to action. Pick one of the above. You don't have to do all of them. Pick one of the above. Explore how Akeem might be able to help you. Additionally, read The Alchemist. Alchemist. If it's like our favorite book
Yes.
ever, and we're two cool people, I'm telling you, you should be reading The Alchemist. So here's the deal. Change only happens when you choose to move forward and take action. So you have several action steps that you can take that's comfortable for you. But I do highly recommend buy the stick, but the Flipstik, but also connect with Akeem. Thank you, my friend, again for being on. Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to Changing the Sales Game with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.com. I am truly honored to have you on this journey of changing your sales game. And my guests and I truly, truly hope we inspire you to take the action to move your needle, to up your game to whatever that means to you. I love you all, and I'll see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Thanks.